over to this computer. Welcome, everybody, and welcome to our what seems to be an annual presentation on AI and how students can use it to their advantage in their hiring trends. I'd like to introduce my colleagues who'll be presenting today's webinar. We have Lee Monserrati and Elizabeth Ferguson, both career coaches here at Leeds. I think Elizabeth will be watching the chat, so if you have questions during the presentation, go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll try to address them either in real time or at the end. And we usually do have time for questions and discussions at the end, so please feel free to ask us anything. All right, take it away, Lee.
All right, actually, I'll let Elizabeth start.
I'm going to start and I'm going to hand it on over to Lee. Again, my name is Elizabeth Ferguson. I'm a career coach who focuses in accounting, strategy and entrepreneurship students, sustainable business students, supply chain management students, leadership students, and human resources students. So a lot of variety of students looking for their first professional position, either whether it be an intern or a full-time job. And when Lee starts, she'll tell a little bit more about what she focuses on. But I did want to just take this time to say thank you for um, watching this webinar. This is a webinar that we did last year, but it's changed because AI has changed. And in fact, our whole tact has changed. When ChatGPT first came on the scene, it was pretty apparent that it was going to have an immediate effect on students, not only their schoolwork, but definitely on their search for jobs and writing cover letters and writing resumes. And there are all these tools out there in the marketplace that students can use that are AI generated to help on different elements of their job search. And that was the focus of uh, prior presentations on this. This one we actually took a different tact, and it really Lee's going to break down different elements of the job search process and where AI can work and where it falls flat. So we're not focusing so much on, oh, what tools are out in the marketplace? What are we using here at Leeds? What can you help students use at Leeds? Really, it's more even a higher level view of AI in general and how students are using it and how students are misusing it. So thank you for attending this, and I'm going to hand it over to Lee.
Thanks. And again, I'm Lee Monserrati. I don't have all of the students that Elizabeth talked about. I focus on finance and real estate, and my background is more in account management and sales. About 2 decades at CEB, which is now Gartner. So anyway, we'll just jump right into it. Oh no, we're not. Now I'm having your advancement problem, Elizabeth.
I think it has something to do with Zoom.
Ah. Oh, I don't know how that. Oh, okay. All right. So last year, when Elizabeth led the conversation, all of the students were really kind of on their own. We hadn't yet used ChatGPT across CU Boulder. Now AI is table stakes. So before, we would have the conversation with students about how it would be ideal to go ahead and identify the job descriptions and put that into ChatGPT with their resume and create a cover letter that they could then edit personally and maybe make some changes to their resume. Now it's completely different. It's really not about cover letters or about what prompts to use. It's about whether students are using AI strategically across the entire search. So if any of you are recruiters or responsible for hiring, please feel free to interject and share what you're seeing. But there's a lot higher application volume that students are encountering right now. Recruiters can really spot generic AI output quickly. Elizabeth was telling me, I didn't know the term, but it's AI slop. So I'm sure you've seen some of those things land in your inbox. And you really need to make sure that the students are using authentic preparation. So can you still see the student even though they might have been aided with AI? So the students who benefit the most aren't necessarily the ones with the best prompts. They're ones who are using AI strategically across the entire job spectrum. The first step in that is the exploration. A lot of times students will come in and they know that they're studying finance, but as far as like what they want to do within finance or what they want to do within sustainability, we help them talk about what they're good at, what they'd like to be able to do as far as activities. And we talk at that point about like whether or not they like to work with other people, whether they like to work in groups, whether or not they like to do spreadsheets behind the scenes. And then we talk about targeting industries or roles or companies. So this can vary by student. Maybe they say they know they absolutely want to be in Colorado, so they're limiting their search there. Maybe they want to do something in cybersecurity, but specifically in California, so that would kind of change it a little bit. So a lot of times they'll come in. This is where I feel like a lot of students come in and they know that they might want a particular role, but as far as what industry, maybe this comes up a little bit more in finance. Well, they'll say, I don't know where I'd like to work. And so we talk about their interests. Maybe they're golfers, and maybe Ping might have a position for an entry-level finance analyst, or maybe they're really into the outdoors and we have a conversation about Vail Resorts. So whatever it is, this is kind of where we start bringing their personal passions and the preparation that they've done in school together. And then it's their positioning. So how do I tell my story? This is really helpful. A lot of times, this is where they naturally gravitate towards using AI, so they can bring up the job description and tell Claude or ChatGPT a little bit about themselves and start to create a story that put those things together so that they can contrast themselves with other applicants. And then there's always the step of how do I make sure that my resume is being seen, right? So if I know the company or the industry that I want to be in, how do I use my network, whether it's through, my mentor, whether it's through LinkedIn, how do I start to put these things together so that there'll be someone on the other side when I send in my resume that can make sure that it gets seen, right? So the first element, and this is kind of where the conversation was last year, is how to make sure that our resume gets through ATS. And now it's beyond that a little bit, is just how do I make sure that I'm connecting who I am to somebody within the organization, or to make sure that I'm using my network. And then it's preparing for the interview. So we used to do a lot of this manually. Last year, we have question banks, so lists of questions from students who might have already applied at JP Morgan, or maybe they have looked at Fidelity. And so we have records of what those interview processes are and what sort of questions are likely to be asked. Now we can also aid the students with ChatGPT or with AI here. So we'll be able to upload the job description and ask what questions they should be prepared for, if there are case studies that might come up in the interview process, those types of things. And then finally, having the decision and starting to take a look at the offer and whether or not this is competitive, or there's other things that they want to be looking at. Maybe they have a couple different offers and they want to be able to compare and contrast them. Anything to add there, Elizabeth? Okay. So we're really trying to be strategic in that first stage of what are my strengths? What are my interests? And then how do I also position any sort of class experience or work experience into language that demonstrates that I know how to do the activities that are going to be required of me in this particular job. So a lot of times AI can help them look at career possibilities that they hadn't otherwise considered. And it helps them take a look at some of their interests and translating them into specific role types or functions. I had one student who said that they always approach everything as a little bit of a pessimist. And that they're always trying to poke holes in other people's approaches. So, why not consider audit, for example? Anyway, this allows the students to pressure test their own self-assessment against some of the role realities and do some of the deeper digging that might not be apparent to them. Where it backfires is when students lean too heavily on AI and just assume that whatever the output is should be embraced. So it becomes a verdict as opposed to just a starting point or another data point in the conversation. And a generic personality quiz isn't necessarily your full identity. So we want to make sure that the students are using AI, but not anchoring too heavy on what AI is recommending them to look at. Other inputs are important. And then strategic use about picking where to apply, what industries, roles, and companies should I actually, should I pursue? This is where we have a lot of conversations with students, and AI can help with this too, but maybe they want to be more hands-on. They don't necessarily know if there's somewhere that they'd like to really focus. This might be a really great opportunity for them to work at a startup, for example, and see how they might be able to add value as different opportunities presents, as opposed to going to a larger organization where they might be really siloed and focus a lot on getting one particular activity down really, really well. So using AI can help them compare industries, the different stages of a life cycle for a company, different entry-level pathways, and then also come up with some lesser-known companies that might not necessarily have surfaced through other ways that they're searching. They build a tiered target list, and then they have real reasoning behind it. One of the tools that we use here is Vault. This might be familiar to you from other conversations or previous conversations, but this allows them to kind of use industry profiles, figure out industry rankings, do some employer research, and get some employer perspectives and understand, like, what are some of these roles like day to day? What can I expect to make salary-wise? And if I enter into this particular point in an organization, where else might I be able to go from there? So where it backfires, again, when people just are embracing the AI recommendation and they're confusing that AI knows something about this with absolutely, this is a great choice for me, or creating a long list as progress when it's really avoidance. Mass applying to AI generated company lists with no real fit or logic. We always want to make sure that the students are customizing everything as they go along, and then also doing that step of the networking. Did you have something, Elizabeth?
I just wanted to
Yeah.
add that if your students are that you're mentoring are looking in markets that you might not know much about, like say they want to move to Raleigh, Durham, and you don't know much about Raleigh, Durham, I really encourage students to use AI to do research on markets because they will gravitate to maybe the one or two companies that they would know about in Raleigh, Durham, or whatever market. But it really is a great first pass at, hey, just get an overlay of who the market players are. And I think just using ChatGPT, Claude, whatever, is a great way just to start at a very high level to say, well, who's running in that market? And it's so much quicker than in the old days when you really had to hunt and peck to find out what the market was all about.
Thank you. Okay, so building the narrative. How do I tell my story for this specific target? I'm going to go ahead and jump here to the leads tool that's mentioned on this page, which is Forage. This is a resource that students can use that give them free virtual job experiences from companies. They have authentic examples of what a day-to-day might be like at a particular role. And so we really talk to students about the importance of being able to demonstrate through your resume and your cover letter and your interviews how you just naturally step right into that environment, and it's going to be a really great fit. This is about proving that you were the best candidate, the one who's going to need the least amount of time to get up to speed and make an impact. And so we want to make sure that students are using the same language that they're seeing in job postings, to demonstrate that similarity. So for example, you picture somebody who is working in finance in New York, and you picture somebody who is working in finance in California. They're going to dress differently. Their hours are going to be different. They're going to use different language. And we want to make sure that that is the same thing that's incorporated throughout their resume, their cover letter, and their interviews. How can they use their coursework and projects that they might have been working on to demonstrate that there is role relevant similarity and evidence that like they already know how to come in and build a particular finance model, or they already know how to do VLOOKUPs, or whatever the case may be. We really want to make sure that students are demonstrating that they have had hands-on experience through their internships or through their coursework, more so than just having learned about it in class. This is also a great opportunity to make sure that they're using LinkedIn and the About section to really target their audience. So it is totally common that they are going to be looked at online on LinkedIn by any sort of recruiters. And also it's free real estate. So if anybody is doing a search out there and it's a job they haven't applied to, by all means. That's why there's that opportunity to make sure that the About section is really doing a good job of tailoring and drawing attention to who they are and what they might be able to do in addition to what they are specifically looking for, so that they're drawing the attention from the people who can really put them in that type of role. So really spending time with the students so that they can use AI, taking it from their internship experience and being able to translate that into real work and real job experiences that surface examples. So if they've gone through the Forage information, for example, or done their research through AI, then they know what those day-to-days look like, and they want to make sure that they're presenting themselves as a professional as opposed to just a student who's looking for their next entry-level job. So anything that's fully written by AI is going to sound completely written by AI and demonstrate that the student doesn't really have as much of their own voice, but they might be able to use the internet tools. They don't necessarily need to use identical phrasing across everything that they're doing, but again, we want to make sure that it looks that they can just step into that role and be completely at home in that new environment. And we want to make sure that they're being honest about their skills and their responsibilities that they've had in the past.
I had a student early last year who came in with a resume and a cover letter entirely written by AI. And we spent a half an hour debating. She could not understand why she couldn't use what AI had written. And it was funny because it was the phrasing, the little dashes, the punctuation was so apparently AI. I was like, well, if I can pick it up, anyone can pick it up. And so if you're working with students on their resumes, and if they can't speak to whatever bullet point is on their resume and explain to you why that bullet point is on the resume and why they wrote it and why it's important, then it might be that AI has written that bullet point for them and they haven't really tuned into what they've put on the paper. And I see students getting caught up on that because I also will ask students about certain bullet points. Why did you write that? And every once in a while, a student will say, oh, the AI wrote it. I didn't really look at it, or my brother wrote it, and then it even happens. But as you're working with students, I would kind of question them. Hey, did you come up with this? Who wrote this resume for you? Because in an interview, they're gonna be held accountable to those bullet points that are on the resume. And if AI is on the cover letter and a recruiter reads this AI written cover letter, they're probably just gonna pass right over the student. So it helps just to be that gate check as a mentor, to help them out and really have them think about what they've written in their narrative.
This is another point where you can really see when students, oh yeah, sorry, did you have a question?
Yeah, hey there. I'm not sure if we're doing
Go for it.
questions or
Absolutely, we
just
can handle it.
thoughts. All right, cool. So, hi everyone. My name's Misha. I did one turn as a mentor this previous academic year and had a really good experience. Um, I'm a Leeds grad from the 90s. Um, the thought I had just based on Elizabeth, what you were just saying is like what I saw was like maybe it's something that someone wrote their original thoughts, then put it through the AI filter, hey, tighten this language, what have you. And that's kind of that gray area where like, okay, it's based on what the soon to be soon graduate was writing, but it wasn't entirely her work. So I'm just curious from your guys' perspective, sort of like where does that gray area, where do you cross the line um, when you're having AI edit your writing?
Lee, you want to take a shot at that
Sure.
gray
I
area?
mean, I feel like that's a great question, Misha. I think, first of all, as you get a feel for the student, I think you know what's authentically theirs and what's not. And if it doesn't feel like something that would come out of their mouth, then I would reel them back. Kind of like what Elizabeth was saying, like if they can't come up with examples or a story around that bullet, then chances are it's going to make it seem like there might even be a bigger gap than in reality. Cover letters, I'd probably be a little bit more discerning and basically make sure that, I mean, that is the student's opportunity to be personal and to be creative, much more so than a resume. So I might be able to overlook it on a bullet as long as they can speak to it. But if it is getting in the way of getting a feel or a sense for who she is, that in a cover letter, then I would definitely say that like nobody's going to be interested in hiring AI. So you might be preventing your real personality from coming out.
I totally agree with Lee. Like, I'm less concerned about the bullet point if they've approached it that way. They've written it first, then they've had AI tighten up the language. I think that's fine. If hopefully they went back and tweaked a little bit as they put it back on their resume, but probably not if I know most of the most students. But I totally agree with her on the cover letters. Like if it's just screaming AI, they're missing an opportunity.
We used to always talk about, like the sandwich strategy of giving feedback. Remember that was like say something good and then give them the hard message and then, you know, tell them something else positive at the end. I kind of feel like AI has its own sandwich strategy these days. So like if a student is putting in like, here are some of the things that I've done, please, turn these into bullets for me, then the student also needs like they start the input, they have AI do something, and then they're refining it at the end. So it feels like them as opposed to just like a two-step process. They want to make sure at the end that, in addition to having great bullets, it feels like an authentic individual.
Yeah, yeah. Great. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Reaching the right people is really, I feel like, the best opportunity for students to use AI in a very powerful way that enhances what they're learning, but also lets them come across as themselves. And it's probably, I don't know if you would agree with this, Elizabeth, but I feel like this is where there's that temptation to cut corners the most. So I always want my students to be using AI to put together research for them on the company. Why would you be a good fit for this company? What is the company known for? What is their culture like? I at least half of the time will stump students by asking them, what does Jamie Dimon think about this? Or what do you think about Jamie Dimon's recent decisions? Or whatever it is, like they get stumped by the CEO or the CFO being mentioned. And I would prefer that if they really want that job, I want to know that they've done their work on the leadership team and they know why they want to do sales at that particular organization, for example. Whatever their sales philosophy is, I want to see that they've done their work. So AI can do the heavy lifting for them and kind of give them a dossier, if you will, that they should study, but they have to have been able to do the work themselves and be able to talk eloquently and off the cuff about the research that's been done. So this, I think, is the biggest opportunity and where we see the students fall down the most.
Hey, Lee, with that advice in mind, do you suggest that they do the research and then going back to writing the draft by hand before using AI and then incorporating AI to improve it would be the recommended way to approach it for them?
Yeah, I think so. When you're talking about a written document, I think this is where, like, as coaches and mentors, we have the most opportunity because you also want to see that they've done that research in the way that they're answering the interview questions, right? So you want them to be able to make references to the way that the company has grown or certain, important decisions that might have come up recently. You want to make sure that they're not just giving lip service to like, I really want to work for North Face. It's such a great organization and there's really nothing behind that when you start to probe. But if they know some of the decisions that have been made or changes in the organization, then I think they can really demonstrate that they've used AI in a powerful way that anybody would want to have brought into the organization, right? As opposed to doing it for them.
Thanks, Lee.
Yeah.
I just want to add, it's so easy to do this research now with AI that if a student isn't doing this type of research as they're applying or interviewing for a job, all the other people who are interviewing are. So they're just putting themselves at a disadvantage because the barriers to getting the information and getting a pretty good sense or an overview fairly quickly is pretty easy using artificial intelligence now. So there's really kind of no excuse.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Is there a preferred LLM that anyone finds is best for the students?
Well, the university has contracted with Chat GPT, so all the students have
Got it.
an
Okay.
elevated version of that.
Thank you.
Okay. Converting conversations to offers. How do I prepare to sound like myself at my best? There's really no substitute for practice. And this is a great way to use your time with the students, giving them feedback as they ask common, questions that they're going to get on a regular basis, questions about the role and the job description. Let's go ahead and have some of those prepared. A lot of times you see a disconnect. The student wants to ask questions about like the day-to-day or how often they're going to be going into an office and those sorts of rudimentary questions that don't necessarily demonstrate any sort of like strategic vision or positioning, and also probably not something that a senior level individual could answer, nor would a recruiter be able to answer that. So knowing when and where those questions are best directed is really helpful to be able to like have some coaching from you. We always want them to use the STAR examples. They don't have to have many. They have to do 4 or 6 of them to be able to demonstrate like what it is that they can do and talk through some examples from their internships or from courses, but also to not sound completely practiced. So even though this is obviously human output, the more they just seem to be performing and having gone through these examples before, the less compelling they actually are. So practicing out loud with structured platforms before they do the real thing, they have access to a tool called Big Interview, which will give them ratings and allow them to go through mock interviews. But again, this is a really great way for you to spend your time with the students. Chances are they are always going to be asked why this particular company. So to your point before, Scott, like why Adobe? what products, like not just like, oh, it's a great place to work and they have a great sales organization. Like, show me that you've done your research, that you either know the products or the leadership or their vision in some way that you are, uniquely positioned to be able to answer that call. So moving them away from memorization and more towards being really compelling in the way that they're presenting themselves and demonstrating that they've done their research. Great. And then evaluating their offers. This is probably something that they would come to you with. I love being able to do these negotiation conversations. Ideally, students are going to have a couple different offers and they can choose the one that's best for them. That doesn't always mean it's the one with the highest compensation. Some of the things that I feel like students have missed in the past, like I think I saw one a couple weeks ago that had any sort of time off needed to be approved within 30 to 60 days. I don't know that students, recent grads are always going to have that amount of lead time in order to be able to take off a day. So just things like that, kind of talking through and just pointing out how they're going to handle those things as opposed to, only focusing on the dollar amount and how much vacation they have and then being out the door, or having conversations if there is a gap between what they were hoping to make and what they did make, to try to understand what the performance management system might be like, when they would be evaluated, what sort of things they would have to accomplish in order to be able to be reevaluated, either in terms of salary or in terms of like a bump in their responsibilities. So those are things that, like, based on your experience, the student's not going to know to ask. And so kind of talking about an entry level position and where they can go from there. This doesn't have to be your dream job. It is your first job. So there are some things that we want to make sure are covered. And then from there, it might be that they are entering day one, knowing that they're going to be networking to get to where they want to go, even if they have a solid offer, and they may have their forever job right there. But please point out to them the types of things that you might look for with the discerning eye for an offer letter. Elizabeth, anything there? Yeah.
I just want to reiterate, and this has nothing to do with AI, but on these conversations, the gut check is so important. Like if they've got red flags in their head and they're not quite knowing what to do with it, it it's great to have those discussions with students. I think they forget to listen to their gut, like, hey, this just doesn't feel right.
And this is another opportunity to talk about networking as well, just to make sure that they know it's not a one-time thing that they're entering into. So they might have felt, especially if they're an introvert like me, that that was a necessary evil that they had to go through in order to get this job. It really is the development and that cultivation of the network and their continued relationship with you that's going to help them get to where they want to be. So, they need some hands-on experience. Maybe this is a chance to be able to get that, but they can't lose sight of the fact that it might take other people to help them within their network to understand what they're capable of and go where they're wanting to go next. So here are just some of the obvious things that demonstrate to recruiters, to us, and to you, once you start to see them, that AI is really being leaned on way too much. The generic language, the identical phrasing, vague accomplishments, inflated skills or experiences, the over-polished writing, and not being able to discuss the materials that they've put forth. So back to that sloppy AI term. And here are some of the best practices as far as what AI users do across every stage when they're really strategic about it. Treating AI as a thinking partner. So again, this is just a place to bounce your ideas and to formulate some of your thoughts before you get it down on paper. Practice it in a spoken way, not just a written way. Make sure that you can say it out loud convincingly. So if you're not convinced, do not let that student walk out of there solidifying that script. Go ahead and push on them and verify before they trust. Not all the information in AI is correct, right? So you don't want to necessarily have that student who accepts everything as gospel. And if you know something's off, definitely push. Protect their own voice. So we want to use AI polish, but not in a way that it strips personality, and stay very specific to the target. So every output is getting tailored to one person for one role. And use AI to help them build evidence, not just the claims. Here are some questions that might be helpful for you as you're trying to find out whether or not a student is being strategic or sloppy in their utilization of AI. So, can you explain every bullet in your resume, or just spot checking and making sure that they can do that? Ask them where they had AI help them, and what's still their own judgment. It might be obvious, but it at least get the dialogue started, and you can let them know that AI is just a tool, but maybe they're missing that last component of putting themselves back into the equation. Would you feel comfortable defending this answer out loud? And what stage of your search are you in? So you want to use AI strategically, compounds across every stage of the search, but you want to clarify what they want, using AI to help them target where to apply, preparing for real conversations, whether that's identifying contacts or just preparing the conversation that goes along with the bullet points, and then using their own judgment to decide if this is the right offer for them. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of insight into understanding what they could use some help from you on, and where there are some other tools through Leads that they can access, whether it's Forage or Vault or Big Interview. You aren't necessarily the only resource. And so we want to make sure that they are using the things that they have strategically, and not burning through their contacts with you, where they could be using something else. But that real human involvement, that experience that you all bring to the table, is exactly what's going to help them realize whether or not the investments of time that they've used with other resources are actually paying off. And if they need to redirect, that's going to be best coming from you. So if they can't say it convincingly out loud, then whether or not they're using AI, it's almost irrelevant. And that's something they need to go back to the drawing table and make sure that they can talk about themselves and present the most compelling version of themselves, tailored for each of the roles that they're applying to. Thank you so much.
I'd love to open it up to any questions that you have. You can put them in chat, raise your hand. But what I think I wanted to convey is, as a career coach, the mentorship program is so important for our students. So thank you for being mentors, because it is probably one of the most valuable career things we do at Leads. So thank you.
Hey, this is Steve. I just wanted to amplify what I heard Lee say on that last slide in that last section about practicing the storytelling convincingly and landing your message in an authentic way. And I saw that there's a tool for that, for practicing that, which I think is awesome that you guys have been down this road already, because when I mentor students, I think that's where they seem to fall down, is that ability to speak about their skills and tell me a story, and land that story in an authentic way. And so I'm happy to see that in multiple parts of the journey here.
Steve, that's it's such a great point. And do you have any particular trick that works with students to get them to be more authentic? I'd love to hear it.
Well, okay. I mean, here's when I've done this coaching, I ask them to break down their skills and expect this question. Tell me about a time where you had to manage in an environment of ambiguity. Or that's maybe a hard question for a student, but that's maybe more of a tenured person. But then break down that skill into a problem, solution, resolution story. That, here was the problem we needed to solve. And here's what I did as part of the team that solved it. And then here's the result that, the outcome for the company. And so we call it a PSR, or I call it a PSR. That's how I've been coached on that. And you got to do it in like 3 minutes, and you need to practice it with your real voice in front of the mirror using the tool on your iPhone or the tool that I just saw on the slide. But think about your story in problem, solution, resolution. Like that's your story arc, and your skill has to be embedded in there. The skill you saw in the job description that you're trying to convince that interviewer you have because you interned last year and you had to do that. Like, tell me a story.
Yeah, I think the tool that you're referring to is called Big Interview, which is an AI interview platform that now all students have access, have accounts to for free, and they can practice interviews based on what they're interviewing for um, through AI, and it gives all sorts of feedback. It's just another tool.
Steve,
Great.
that's a great way to do it. One of the things that I find most helpful in those moments where it's really, really bad attempt, chances are the students are going to be harder on themselves than you are going to be on them. So at least for the first pass, sometimes it's helpful to be like, do you want to grade yourself on that one? And let them kind of try it again. But that way you're kind of establishing the baseline as not acceptable in their own words and letting them go through and practice a little bit more before you have some true feedback, something value added to offer. Sometimes kind of like to what you were saying, Steve, if they haven't done that practice, especially in a mirror or something like that, they're probably going to be surprised at how it comes out the first time around. And so you don't necessarily have to use any harsh words. They can probably identify that as their own.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think Scott's got a question.
Yeah.
I do. Thanks. First of all, very helpful because I've noticed in the last year that it's been harder for my mentees, my undergraduate mentees, to find internships. And so I feel like they have to apply a lot more even to get a response for an interview. I don't know if my peers have run into the same issue, but I found it a lot harder in the last couple of years to have them find internships than I have in the past. And I've been doing this with Sally for probably 12 or 15 years. So just curious, and I don't know if that has to do with AI. I'm hoping that maybe some of the things that you showed today, um, I can craft maybe a better response. I don't know if the problem is the cover letters that are going out or the applications that are going in, but I was kind of shocked, and I started earlier and earlier with my undergraduate mentees to start applying for their internships when I first start with them.
It's so true and so real, Scott. So thank you for bringing that up. I think this is part of the reason, and I'm sure Elizabeth has some great information too. I think this is part of the reason it's so important that students are looking towards presenting on their resume the bullets of what they've done in class as hands-on experience. There's, other things like the Badami Center that can help with experiential learning, but this is where students are missing that opportunity to be able to have that hands-on experience in an internship that gets them the next internship and gets them the job. So you're right, like if they miss it the first time, it's harder and harder to catch up. So, this is where I have, students where I talk to them about what their families do or what their mentor does. Like I have people who say that they want to go into sales, but they've never had experience with Salesforce or HubSpot. So I'm like, why don't you volunteer yourself across a weekend to do data entry? Like anything that you can do to roll up your sleeves and get dirty and show that you know how to use those tools that would be embraced in an internship, those are going to set them apart and allow them to be ahead. So that, you know, sometimes they might need to be creative and volunteer their time to get that first rung on the ladder, but those are the types of things that will allow them to, you know, kind of work their way up.
That's great advice. Thank you, Lee. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
So in the chat, Sally and I have been putting some of the resources that have been mentioned. If you're interested, you can pull the website off the chat. Scott, but to your original point, the volume has increased incredibly. I mean, it's just an onslaught because of AI. Students are making bots to go out and apply to everything under their sun, you know, with no, it's just creating noise for these poor recruiters. I actually feel
Right.
bad for the recruiters, but it's an environment that we're operating right now, and hopefully some calm will come out of that chaos, but that may be what you're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the responses that came through are more, I'm going to call it sales focused jobs, even though they're under the guise of finance, but maybe not necessarily the best fit for the mentees. So I want to be careful with them going down that road where it's more of a, I want to call it a sweatshop, but it's not really sales, right? And it's not, the overturn rate is very high. So we kind of investigate that when they go through. Those they seem to get a lot of responses for, but regular internships at major finance companies and things like that found it very difficult for them to even get their foot in the door. Shockingly so.
That's very true. One of the things that we tell them is that, you know, they're not going to be I mean, I think the original fear was they were going to be replaced by AI. And now it's that, you know, those students that use AI very strategically and really well are the ones who are going to get the job. It's going to allow them to come up the curve faster and function a lot more like an entry-level position than an intern. And so that's kind of their currency too, is if they, you know what it is that they want to go into and they can make some suggestions about how they would use AI in the role to be more strategic, then that might be something that their interviewer or person with whom they're networking might not be able to think about. So it gives them an opportunity to kind of trade. Here's some of the ways that I would actually use AI if I were in this role. Would this be helpful? I can save you some time with a quick conversation and streamline some operations. And then maybe that allows them to kind of get a foot in the door too. Forage and Vault also offer some simulations that they can go through, and then they can see what a day-to-day is like. Maybe they only have a couple hours, but the idea of like being able to watch that and then talk to it in an interview as if they were able to do the job because they've already seen it and know how to do it is so much different than interviewing for the opportunity to give it a try to do that job.
That sounds awesome. That sounds great. I'm psyched to actually check that out myself and take a look.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
No, thanks. It's a great question. And other Scott.
Hi there. Yeah, I love that idea too. I wanted to share an idea and have a question about it. One of the things I've done with a couple students is instead of just critiquing their answers to interview questions or things like that, I do something that I suppose is a little bit related to modeling. We take turns. And I'll ask them a question, they'll answer it. We'll do some feedback on it. Here's what I loved, here's what you might change. And then I do it. They ask me a question, right? And so I would think it would be awesome. And then they critique me and we talk about it. So I'm not the hero with all the answers, right? So it's a little more peer-to-peer almost, except they know I've got experience. And the question I had is with things like, well, with some of your tools, whether it's Forge or Big Interview, I presume we don't have access like the students do. Is that correct?
Yes.
Because it would be awesome if I could plus that idea that I do, the taking turns modeling with Big Interview and have, I'd be putting myself at risk, right, of not having a good answer, but that's what it's all about. and having a question come from Big Interview. So I guess maybe I could set it up so the student could run it for me, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, sorry, go ahead, Elizabeth.
If you really, I love everything you just said. If you really wanted to go down that and put yourself on the line, there are some free AI interview tools. You could
Okay,
just have them jump on that. I think, I
great.
mean, they've been coming and going. Google had one. Yeah, believe it or not, Yahoo had one. So you could just hunt down one of the free ones and do it that way.
Good, great idea. Thank you.
Steve. Do you have a
Steve,
question?
do we answer your question from before?
Which
Mine?
Steve are you talking to?
Oh, Steve Caberman.
No, you did not answer a question for me. So I have two questions actually. One, I'm curious how you selected ChatGTP over other AI tools like Claude, or I don't know, there's probably a half dozen or more out there that I'm not even aware of many of the names, but I've been asking myself this question for some of the things I use AI for, and which is the best, or whatever. So I'm just curious why ChatGTP was selected as the one to make available to students.
So as you can imagine, it's a big research university, and there actually is licenses for all sorts of different large level LLMs, depending on the research, etc. So for whatever reason at the university level, I couldn't tell you, I couldn't even begin to fathom what the conversation was, but that was the contract that was
Okay.
entered, and it could
Yeah.
change.
Well, I mean that's a good answer because I mean if a student asks me, that's I'd like to be able to give them an answer as to why that particular platform was selected. And hey, you're going to a big research university and this is what they do. It's a pretty convincing answer.
Like,
Um,
yeah, my son is actually working with a professor on a large AI project, and he has got some Claude. He's got Claude that he's using. So I know so it depends on what the need is, but for just basic university access, it's ChatGPT.
The
okay.
other thing
That,
I would mention with that too is I used Claude to help me make slides for this week and for last week. I think Claude is so much better when it comes to like PowerPoint. At the same time, if the students are just using it as a conversation to help them do that research and get better, then the output is almost irrelevant. And so it really is making sure that they're not leaning on AI in any way that's going to present that polish and make everything look perfect, but they're just
right.
using it as a thought partner. So I think if we kind of pull it back to that level, then any AI tool is going to be a great way for them to at least be better. But again, we're not looking for it to be an AI output.
Right. Also, I'm curious what you're seeing in terms of how recruiters and HR departments are using AI to screen applicants. I mean, if I send in a cover letter and a resume, there was some discussion during the discussion this morning about, or this afternoon about, you know, something being too obviously AI. Now, a real person could, look at something and probably make that judgment themselves. But it seems to me that if that's one of the things you're screening for, who better to screen for AI than AI? So, what are the HR departments and recruiters doing now to use AI as a screening tool on their end?
Well, I mean, they used to use applicant tracking systems, which they still do, and it really makes a lot of sense. I don't know an exact answer, but it makes a lot of sense that those applicant tracking system platforms are now providing sort of AI detection component.
My
They don't,
understanding, yeah, from some conversations is it Greenhouse? Yeah. Or like Workday have AI already built in. So they'll go ahead and give the recruiter a ranked order of the applicants. And so it's really just that you're not going to get seen if you don't have a certain percentage match. So, you know, I took a group of students in February to the University of Texas at Austin to a case study competition that was held by Apple. And one of the things that the woman from Apple said was, don't put Excel skills on your resume as if that's it. I want to know what specific skills you have. I want to know if you can do VLOOKUPs. I want to know, you know, I want to know what it is. I'm never going to actually even notice your resume to call you in to ask those questions if you don't break it down more. So I kind of feel like to the extent that that's the question that you're asking, Steve, it's, you know, it's kind of like you have to demonstrate enough that it's going to go through those systems. Otherwise, they're just going to be too low in the rankings to ever have anybody open it up, which is, you know, the other part of that conversation is networking and making sure that somebody is going to be able to pull that out and that they'll have another way of making sure that they get included in the reviewed resumes.
Thank you.
Are
So
there any
go
other
ahead,
questions?
Elizabeth.
Are there
I was
any
just
other
gonna-
questions? Are we done? We're out of time. We're out of time. Go ahead, Sally.
I was just going to say, if any of you have questions that come up either after watching this at home or those of you who are here, you can always message me. You never have to figure these things out alone. So if you have a question about something that your student's going through, feel free to message me, and typically I will reach out to one of the career coaches for further information or advice. So don't be shy about waving your help flag or asking questions. We're here to support you as much as we are to support the students. So keep in touch and let us know how we can help you. Thanks everybody for coming today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care.